A little behind the scenes.
Yeah. Oh, you recorded that?
Welcome to this podcast. It's making me thirsty, the number one destination for Seinfeld fans. This episode 133. Today's guest has over 40 years experience in the business as a comedian, actor, and writer. He's an Emmy Award-winning writer for HBO's Dennis Miller Live. You know him from countless hit films, including The Informant, Groundhog Day, Mrs. Doubtfire, and Dinner for Schmucks. You've seen him in The Office, The League, Veep, I'm Dying Up Here. And of course, he played the Drake in 2 Seinfeld episodes in season 4, The Handicap Spot and the pilot. Please welcome Rick Overton. Rick, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for remembering.
The Drake. So
yeah,
take us back.
There's a real Drake.
Right, here it is. So
No, it's based on a real guy.
Right, let's hop into that. Who's it based on?
I never got the rest of the story. I just heard, like the way Crazy Joe Davola is just a
right.
Yes, yeah.
Basically, that they also called, and of course, Kramer, of course, we all know Kramer now,
Yeah.
And it was another real guy basis thing that there's supposed to be a real Drake out there somewhere. Hello, real Drake.
Yeah, well, we'll have to get to the bottom of that. Larry David and all these writers. Yeah, I think all have these crazy kind of connections and stories that kind of make the show what it was, right? So take us back 29 years ago, Rick, believe it or not, the Handicap aired on NBC. So it was around May of 93. It was the second to last episode of the great season 4. I know you were doing a lot of stand-up, but tell us a little bit about how that role came about. Do you remember anything about the audition? Was it a Jerry connection?
Yeah, there's a Larry connection and a Jerry connection, and I started with Jerry. I kind of came up with him and Larry. Larry was a little ahead of me.
Mm-hmm.
He was already kind of in the cool club, but when I showed up, I showed up just shortly after. So I came into the audition, and I was looking at the part, and I proposed something kind of weird. I said, what if he just, because it wasn't really in the part where he was going to come apart this big, but what if he just comes the hell apart? Because people on Seinfeld generally are kind of, they don't show, they'll show a lot of anger sometimes, but they don't show breaking down and crying and all those other creepy, get me out of my skin, uncomfortable things. So I thought, why don't I just give them a huge serving of that while they're sitting on the sofa to make them want to get the hell out of there.
Right.
And that crying, just something you just don't want to see a friend going through,
Yeah. That's
like,
great. Yeah, when we watched the scene again today, I've seen it a million times. But Elaine's reactions Julia's reactions are so great to what you're talking about. Yeah, she's just like, okay, they're kind of like looking at the TV, like, and they're getting so awkward. So you really nailed it. Pulling off that awkwardness, like you said, of the friend crying. It's great that you brought that into the audition. They must have really liked it at that point.
Exactly. Not every audition will have that old friend connection where you can go, can I try something kind of over the top like this? You don't always have that leeway. You got to do your thing, man. Get in there and then get out of there and wait. But
so
I have a little elbow room. I could maybe pose an idea.
So you're the audition with Larry and Jerry, I assume, Mark Hirschfeld, and you kind of just ad-libbed the crying part, and they were like hook, line, and sinker bought it?
Added and ad lib. I guess you could say I heightened it up. I made it much, much bigger, but I would still try to do the dialogue while disintegrating, like when they asked about the Italian restaurant, I go, well, actually, I don't know, it's pretty good, just crying, giving friendly advice, do a contrast.
That's great. It's funny. You mentioned the Jerry and the Larry connection, and then you mentioned the real Drake, right? There's another very interesting connection we wanted to bring up. I know your father was the band leader for Thelonious Monk. Am I correct in saying that? So the arranger.
Monk at Town Hall. That's right.
Yeah. So did you? I don't know if you knew this, but we talked to Pat Hazel, a writer on Seinfeld, and the name Monk's Cafe, Monk's the coffee shop, was because of Thelonious Monk. They were, just in the writing room trying to come up with a name because everything they pitched was used or was real. They saw a poster, and so they went with Thelonious Monk. But that was a really interesting connection. We thought that we'd share that.
And the coffee shop was a little more complex because in New York, if you named something, whatever crazy name you gave it, if there was one like that, you could get sued by the restaurant. They would think it was that restaurant.
Right.
So I don't know how many different diner names and things. We tried dozens and then almost hundreds of names. You couldn't really do Bob's. You couldn't do whatever because there was going to be one in the state of New York, if not in the city. So we had run out of even crazy names that wouldn't get cleared by the network. And there was a Thelonious Monk poster in that office. I don't know. It was just in the Castle Rock office. And I think out of exhaustion, I don't remember if it was Jerry or Larry said, just try Monks. And then they go, yep, that's good. It's clear. Right. And we're like, but at that time we didn't care anymore.
Isn't that a thing of beauty?
Yeah. Yeah. But that's interesting. I mean, so your dad was in the business and your mom was in the business as well. I mean, is that kind of where you got the bug from to get started in kind of showbiz?
Maybe. Dad was a jazz guy. He was in Monk's world. You'll see lots of old black and white photos of them at the piano and at the keys, and there'll be this other guy with his hair slicked back and a cigarette and a suit and a loose tie, and that's my dad. Working with him to make these arrangements. If you ever get to something that's called the Jazz Loft CD, or if you can watch it I think it's on Netflix. It's a documentary about what is the invention of bebop, taking it out of swing sound and putting into sort of a more modernistic, abstract 50s place. My dad was one of the guys who helped ground floor that. So he, and if you ever see the movie Minamata with Johnny Depp, Eugene Smith was best friends with my father. And my father's jazz studio that they had the Jazz Loft in is in Eugene Smith's building. So there's another,
Huh. A lot of connections. And I would say there's a lot of connections at the high school. You went to Dwight Morrow High School, right? In Englewood?
Yeah.
With who?
John Travolta.
Yeah, that's right. John Travolta, another Seinfeld alum.
Yeah.
Tom Wright. One of my favorite Jets, Bruce Harper, also.
Mm-hmm.
You buddies with him? And obviously Sarah Jessica Parker in later years. But I mean, it's quite a lineup of talent.
Very strong theater department. Because lots of people from the entertainment field would have moved out of Manhattan and used Englewood as kind of like the suburb and the quiet place to go home after working in New York. So a lot of very powerful people in New York lived in Englewood Cliffs, and their kids would go to the schools. And so they had a very strong theater thing to nurture those people,
Of course. So
lucked out. I just lucked out being there.
You lucked out. And then obviously Englewood, right by the GW, just getting back to kind of that Jerry-Larry relationship. So this was season 4 of Seinfeld, the Drake, but you obviously knew these guys for years, and you saw this show kind of, elevating, each and every year. Did you reach out to them for this role? Did they reach out to you? Was this something you want to be a part of, I guess, prior to the audition or not?
Yeah, I got in. And, when I go into an audition where it's a couple of friends, I got a little more of a, might have a chance here.
Right.
But sometimes doing what is kind of bold is memorable in a good way. And sometimes taking that bold gamble move is memorable in a bad way. So you just took a chance that they would like him just disintegrating, And of course, Liz Dennehy is so brilliant at just that lazy fury.
She played that I'm not happy, and you played. We could kind of tell how that breakup happened from that. Just
so scary, perfect.
Yeah.
Man, it was the big and the small contrast thing, right?
Yep. And we had the pleasure of speaking with her as well. So that was great. But I'm curious. So when they brought you back for the pilot, even just that one scene when they kind of had everyone watching the pilot, and then you guys are back together, which is kind of funny too. Watching on the little Watchmen TV because the big screen TV is gone.
First came out called The Watchmen.
Yeah, The Watchmen. Yeah.
A little saltine of a screen, and you're always having to move everything to get the picture to come back in again because everything's UHF, right?
Yeah, a little 3-inch screen. That was those are classics. We talked to a few people who were in the pilot, and everyone had kind of a different story. Were you on set for much of that week, or just kind of came in for the one-day shot of you two, or did you get to kind of be a part of the overall taping? Do you recall the pilot? Because there's a lot going on in that episode. I mean, it was a packed episode, season finale. Just kind of curious, what do you remember about the second time you were back on?
Well, there's of course some block and shoot because it's just impossible to swing set everything for a live. You got to shoot some of it in advance. So certain days you'd be in to shoot your block and shoot, and on other days though you would be there for block and shoot, and I'd be watching lots of other scenes shooting because it's like a shoot day, man. It's not all your shot, but you're there for the whole day. So I would be watching the apartment and any chance I could get to get on the set and watch other scenes. So I would do what I could for that. And then I had to get back and work on my own stuff because I had stuff to do.
Right. Back to the Handicap Spot. So, I mean, great episode and just great guest stars. You mentioned Elizabeth Dennehy. She was wonderful. And what was interesting is this was the first episode of Frank Costanza. Not the Frank Costanza we all know and love, but John Randolph. Were you there? Were you on set for the whole episode that week? Did you get to meet John Randolph and Estelle Harris or any of the other kind of guest stars from that show?
Yes. It was great. But it's just in passing. They're also working on all the things they have to do. Yeah, when you're on I don't know which is heavier on the brain, a 4-camera, there's the two-day, or the a show that's doing lots of block and shoot and building up to it. But I think you maybe have a little more of a movie. There's another chance at the take if it's not a whole crowd watching. But when there's a crowd watching, oh my God, you got to have that down, And so it's hard to really hang and get too close to anybody when they're just doing their thing, just like I'm doing mine, Everyone just got to working it.
Yeah, I mean, and your scenes, I mean, obviously it was with Jerry and Elaine. I know you worked with Elaine on Veep, right? I mean, tell us a little about the kind of Julia Louis-Dreyfus. I feel like she never gets kind of the some of the acclaim that George and Kramer might get, but I mean, she's clearly just brilliant. Would love to hear kind of your thoughts on working with her on 2 different shows.
Yeah, I've heard the comparisons that it's like a Lucy level of genius, and I don't know if we need another analogy. I think now from this point on, other people go to the comparison point of a Julia Louis-Dreyfus level of genius.
Yeah, good point. Especially after Veep.
70 years, it's about going and saying this level of genius is Olympic,
Yeah. And especially after Veep, like Chris mentioned, you're on that, and also, you were on Curb, right? So curious, how that came about. Was it, Larry just kind of pulled you in after the Seinfeld episode and was like, "Yeah, I got something for you." I mean, that must have been an experience working on Curb.
I got some experience on camera. I know where I go and I know what I can do with the whole thing, and I've done lots of improv on camera.
Right.
So you'll look at my IMDb, more than I'd say about half of everything you're looking at, they let me do a little or a lot of horsing around.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think, if I'm not mistaken, you were on The League, and isn't The League and also Veep, both of those are Seinfeld alums that kind of started them, and I believe they're both improv heavy, kind of like Curb, right? They don't really have a structured script, and they kind of let you do your thing. Yeah. So yeah, that must.
Yeah, they go to say this specific thing right now, and I'm the guy with the Well, he thinks he got the dog, and so I had a little. I could play a little bit, but it was so funny. I didn't have to do much. It was mostly just moving around and goofing around. It was good. It's so good. You can just do it. Sometimes you see a thing and go, well, maybe I'll play with this a little bit. We can jazz it up. I don't want to offend anybody, but I think it might be a little fun spot to put this in. And the other times, it's like, no, I just want to do this. I know this will kill right here on the page. And they're pretty brilliant team over there.
Yeah, I mean, clearly the two at the head of the Seinfeld shop, Jerry and Larry, brilliant as well. So, what do you remember? You said you grew up with Jerry, so I'm assuming you met him in the mid to late 70s. What do you remember? What do you remember about meeting Jerry and kind of how he was back then?
His mind was like an industrial joke machine, but he had a very cool style about it. But he was bashing stuff out at a rate lots of us were not writing material at that rate. I was sort of doing my loosey-goosey character-based things that didn't always have that button at the end, They're kind of showcases for dialects and things. And he was bam, 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 stamping out these finely crafted bits. And so we were pretty impressed. He set a new standard, and he kind of created a new style that lots of people have gone on to in one way or another, either take benefit from or emulate.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, trendsetter. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about all these connections. We got one more for you, I guess. The Veep, the League, Curb. You're also in It's Like which was Peter Melman's show, a Seinfeld alum and friend of the podcast. That must have been another one where I'm sure he must have pulled you in from being on Seinfeld. I'm assuming, right? It just kind of there was a lot of Seinfeld alumni probably working on that show. I'm guessing it must have been a little like mini reunion on the set for that one.
It was it gets harder and harder to get to a set and not run into a pal.
Well, that's fun, right? I mean, that must make it fun for an actor just to kind of see the old gang and know everyone and kind of just fall right into it.
It's loads of fun. In fact, it might be a little trouble on the set because you're out there, not focusing on the job for more than a moment. Like the two kids they want to separate in class.
Yeah, but I mean, it's great that you have these connections, and from the 70s to 80s, and then you kind of formulated that into successful appearances on obviously Seinfeld, Curb, I mean, I think that's just the beauty of these guys. We hear that a lot from a lot of guest stars, that the loyalty of Jerry and Larry were just incredible. So they would always be so inviting and gracious. What do you remember most about that week on the Seinfeld set? I mean, again, Thursday night, prime time, right? It was right after Cheers. I mean, it must have been a big lift in your career, I would imagine, right? I mean, I know you were well established then, but I think being on that Thursday night, that big hit show must have been great. I mean, what do you remember? What do you remember most about that week? Who'd you hang out with? What can you tell us?
Well, like I said, it's probably going to be more of an extension of hanging out, just working my stuff. You get down for your day, you get back to your trailer, go over it. You're thinking, hey, that was the rehearsal. Was I too slow with that one? And it's like that. I would hang out with Michael Richards sometimes, and I would hang out with Jerry briefly. But he's got a lot to say on the show too.
Right.
He's kind of work. We got to really respect people's workspace when you're on one of these things, even at lunch.
Yeah,
so
I would imagine.
Yeah, it's good, man. That's funny. That pop up, right back to work.
Yeah. we're huge fans of SNL, namely the 87 to 95 ish era, with Dennis Miller. And I know you worked on his show on HBO as a writer. I'm curious. That's a completely different genre, right, than these sitcoms we're talking about, or even these movies we've mentioned. I mean, what is your wheelhouse? Like, what did you prefer? Is it the writing, those type of that talk show sort of monologue and that sort of thing with Dennis Miller, or is it are you more you love it in front of the camera kind of character acting and things like that? I'm just curious, where you see yourself best.
And there. Do you do a sport?
I used to do three. I retired.
Oh.
I played baseball, football, and I wrestled.
Were there days when you loved that sport more than anything in the world?
All baseball and football, yeah. Wrestling, I never really loved, but
hated it.
Yeah,
same thing.
Yeah.
It's the same. There's going to be days when you love it, days when you hate it. It's based on the conditions of feedback. When you crush the other team, you love that day. When you pull your leg, muscle, it's like you don't love that day, but it's all that one sport. So it's everything. Yeah. It's all those things. There's days when you love it, it's love, hate.
Yeah,
sure.
I can see that, right?
So was Miller a good guy to work with?
Oh, great. That was great. I'm just talking about, tough nights at the stand-up scene and brutal.
Right.
Brutal shows, and then I hate comedy tonight, but I'll fall back in love with it tomorrow.
Yeah, you're the only one up on stage, right? I mean, I hear Jerry talk about that a lot. Like, is the crowd in, Omaha, Nebraska different from the one in Jacksonville, Florida? Do you treat them differently? I'm curious what your answer to this is, but is funny the same to them? And Jerry always says, yes, funny's funny. Like, it doesn't matter where you are. You'll know right away if you got it or you don't within those first, 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. Did you have that same kind of vibe and feeling on stage?
I think it's very sound advice, but it is a little bit more specific to doing universal material. And not every act is genetically designed to do that. Their brains don't write to that. And so where do they go? Do they go to the island of misfit comedians or wherever, the odd duck acts go? But I know I have been kind of at times a rabble rouser and rocked to the boat a little bit and made some trouble. And, thank God for acting. And so I see a few sides of this. It's a tough one. It's tough because not every act can be that machine. Like his mind, he writes to that instantly. And some guys, they just can't even get there. So I don't know. There should be a place for this and a place for those other guys to go.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. It really is. And your perspective is great too. And, speaking of that perspective, you mentioned earlier, in the audition, you kind of took a chance. You knew Larry and Jerry in the room. You said, let me try this, go a little over the top. You get the part. So when you're on set now, when you did that scene, did you go even further? I mean, was there more instruction from Larry? Larry wrote the episode. I know Tom Schronis directed, but he might have been there. Did they take you even, where they said you were great in the audition, just go with that? Or were they like, hey, you know what, let's go even further? Like, how'd that go, actually, the shooting of that scene after, kind of nailing the audition like you did? Because like we mentioned earlier, it played so well with Elaine and Jerry being uncomfortable and looking around, eating the pretzels and everything. But,
Yeah. One for you and then one for me, where it's one right on the book and then one a little. That's what you're asking. I don't remember if that's the instance or whether I just said, before I go into this first one, can I play with, the waterworks and all that crap? Right. So it might have gone like that. This is like a few years ago. And, but I know that I did ask, I raised my hand and I asked.
Yeah, 29 years ago, Rick. Were those real tears? I thought I saw real tears there.
Well, you try to make something from a place that you can use, and I think if you can get there, that's awesome.
And what was the name of that restaurant again? You mentioned it, the Italian place.
Yeah, no, so just because of the word gag. It starts with the word gag, which is, that's great. And
and that TV, I swear, this was '93. I remember going to our friend's house and watching the Bills Cowboys in '93 Super Bowl
on that
exact same
TV.
TV.
Yeah. When that thing breaks, you're just like, what the hell am I gonna do?
You can't bring it to the front of the house and leave it on the driveway. That thing's humongous.
Yeah.
Yeah, we that was.
Here's what we wanted to ask you, Rick. The Seinfeld rap parties are always a fun time. We're told season 4 was a bowling party. Do you remember that?
Yeah. I don't remember all the details of that.
You don't know what you rolled that day?
That's one way to put it. But I was rolling something.
Oh, that's great.
That's what we're talking about.
All right, that's great. This has been great, Rick. I mean, we really, really appreciate your time. If there's anything we didn't touch on that you can remember, I mean, we'd love to hear it. But I know we kind of went through, much of the, your performance was great and legendary career, and it's been a pleasure.
It's my pleasure and honor, and I'm lucky. I know I'm lucky. I landed in that pack of guys, so they knew me as they were coming up. And location. So it was the very exciting opportunity, and to be given a little bit of leeway to do my own kind of thing on top of it, because they were friends. It was a golden on top of golden opportunity.
Yeah, you're a legend, Rick. We appreciate your time.
Thanks again. This is fun.
Thanks, Rick. This was fun. Thank you. Have a good night, man.
You too.
Thanks.